You've been asking for money your entire life, whispering prayers into the dark, scribbling affirmations on scraps of paper, visualizing checks arriving in the mail, repeating mantras until your throat is raw, all in the hope that somehow, some way, wealth would find its way to you. The rituals may have changed with the times, but the underlying impulse has not. In ancient Rome, citizens laid offerings at the altar of Fortuna, goddess of luck, pleading for prosperity. In India, families still light lamps for Lakshmi, the goddess of abundance, hoping her grace will bless their homes. In medieval Europe, peasants lined up outside churches to receive blessings for good harvests, believing divine favor was the key to survival. Across continents and centuries, the act has been the same: asking, begging, petitioning an unseen force to deliver what one lacks. But here's the paradox: every time you ask for money, every time you reach out with words or thoughts or rituals, you may be pushing it further away. What if the very act of asking creates the energetic signature of lack? A signal that says, I do not have. And in sending out that signal, you ensure that your reality reflects exactly that: not having. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast river of abundance, arms outstretched, crying out for water, yet never dipping your hands into the stream. That is the asking trap. We've been taught to believe that wealth sits somewhere outside of us, hidden in vaults, in markets, in the mysterious hands of fate. And so, we perform our rituals like alchemists fumbling in the dark, hoping to strike the right combination, whether it be words, affirmations, or energy shifts that will finally unlock the flow. Yet those who truly master wealth operate differently. The wealthy don't pray for money. They don't beg for money. They don't even think about it the way most people do. Consciously or not, they've stumbled upon a secret. They don't ask. They pull. Not with force, not with manipulation, not with the desperate clutching of a beggar at the city gates. They pull with the quiet magnetism of someone who knows the river is already flowing. Their relationship with money is not one of separation, but of union. They treat money not as a distant object to be summoned, but as a frequency, a current in the quantum field that they can tune into, align with, and receive. This shift, this turning of the lens, changes everything. It reframes money not as a prize awarded by an external authority, but as an ever-present stream of energy responding to the consciousness you broadcast. To understand why this matters, we must look not only at the mechanics of wealth, but also at the long story of human longing for it. Because through history, societies have reflected the same confusion, seeing abundance as something to request, rather than something to embody. Think of the countless fortune seekers of the past, the conquistadors who sailed across oceans, chasing the myth of El Dorado, convinced that gold lay hidden in jungles beyond reach, the prospectors of the California gold rush, who left everything behind to search for glittering rocks in barren earth. Each believed wealth was out there, somewhere separate, waiting to be seized if only they tried hard enough. And yet for everyone who struck gold, thousands died in poverty, disease, or disillusionment. Their tragedy was not just in fortune's cruelty, but in their consciousness. They searched without realizing that wealth was never a prize to be begged or hunted. It was always a frequency to embody. And so we arrive at the question that turns the asking trap inside out. What if money isn't something you petition the universe for, but something you already carry within you, waiting to be drawn into form? What if wealth is not a treasure hidden beyond your grasp, but a vibration you can align with in this very moment? Here is the uncomfortable truth. Money is not what you think it is. It is not stacks of bills in a vault, not digital numbers flickering on a screen, not even the glittering coins that once passed hand to hand in crowded markets. Those are only the costumes money wears, the temporary forms it takes. At its core, money is not a thing at all. It is a frequency. It is energy. It is consciousness, crystallized into form, so it can move through the world. And this is where everything begins to shift. Most people imagine money as external, something floating out in the universe, waiting to land in their pockets if they ask loudly enough. But the wealthy, the ones who live in natural alignment with abundance, do not see it that way. To them, money is a current, an invisible river of energy already surrounding us. They don't ask for it. They tune into it. Think of a room filled with thousands of invisible radio waves. Every station is broadcasting at once, carrying voices, music, stories. But until you tune your receiver to the right frequency, you hear nothing. The broadcast is not being sent to you at the moment you tune in. It was already there, already present, already humming in the air. Money works the same way. Abundance is not waiting for you to ask. It is broadcasting constantly on countless channels. The only question is, what frequency is your inner receiver tuned to? And here is where most of humanity falters. The vast majority walk through life broadcasting what I call the asking frequency. This is the vibration of, I don't have, therefore I need. It is the frequency of prayers uttered in desperation, of affirmations tinged with doubt, of thoughts that quietly insist, if only someday, maybe. The quantum field, the perfect mirror, reflects back exactly what is broadcast. I don't have, it echoes. Therefore, you will continue not having. The asking frequency is rooted in separation. It assumes that you are here and money is there, and that some mysterious bridge must be built across the gulf. This is why religious rituals, prosperity chants, and even modern self-help affirmations often fail. They reinforce the distance between you and what you seek. You kneel before Fortuna, Lakshmi, or the universe itself, asking for a favor that, in truth, can never be granted, because the very act of asking encodes lack. Yet across cultures, there have always been traditions that hint at another way of seeing. In Chinese philosophy, wealth was never only gold or jade, but qi, life force energy flowing in harmony with one's environment. Feng Shui masters did not tell their students to ask for abundance. They told them to align their dwellings with the natural currents of energy already present. In Buddhist thought, craving only multiplies suffering. Detachment from not having allows one to rest in the truth that all is already present. Even in the West, mystics whispered of money as a kind of subtle force, a spirit that flowed most easily when treated not as a possession, but as a current to be circulated. The problem is not that money refuses to appear. The problem is that we are tuned to the wrong station. Asking vibrates with lack. Pulling vibrates with presence. When you begin to shift from one to the other, the change feels subtle, like adjusting a dial a fraction of a turn, but the results are monumental. Because reality itself responds to coherence. Every time you ask, you position yourself as separate from what you seek. You send an encoded message into the quantum field. I am that which I desire. And reality, faithful mirror that it is, confirms the separation. This is why people spend years, even lifetimes, pleading for financial relief and wondering why nothing changes. They are caught in an endless loop of asking, reinforcing the very lack that created the asking. But wealth consciousness operates differently. It functions from what I call the pulling frequency, a vibrational state that says, I am that which I seek, and I am simply calling it into form. It is not request, but resonance. It is not reaching, but receiving. The wealthy do not chase money. They align with it. They embody the frequency of abundance until money, like iron filings to a magnet, simply flows. Can you feel the difference? The asking frequency is tense, grasping, incomplete. The pulling frequency is relaxed, settled, whole. It is the difference between begging for water at the riverbank and cupping your hands to drink. Every time you ask for money, you are declaring to the universe, I do not have it. And consciousness, which always reflects itself back, obeys this command with ruthless precision. You are left standing in the same place you began, empty-handed, waiting, repeating the ritual. This is what I call the asking loop. It is a self-perpetuating cycle where the very act of asking reinforces the absence that gave birth to the asking in the first place. History is full of examples of this trap. Think of the alchemists of medieval Europe who spent lifetimes searching for the philosopher's stone, convinced it could turn lead into gold. They devoted their lives to asking the universe to reveal the secret of wealth. Yet what they received instead was endless frustration. Or consider the peasant farmers who prayed daily for good harvests, while simultaneously living in constant fear of famine. The prayers, though sincere, were often steeped in the assumption of lack. The loop continued. Modern life is little different. People spend decades repeating affirmations, visualizing checks in the mail, or chanting prosperity mantras, yet find themselves still anxious about bills. They do not realize that every affirmation whispered with doubt in the heart is not an invitation to abundance, but a confirmation of separation. So how do we escape the asking loop? The answer is something called coherent assumption. Coherent assumption is not hope. It is not fragile belief. It is the embodied knowing that what you seek is already true, already flowing, already here. When every level of your being, your thoughts, emotions, body, and energy field aligns with a specific reality as if it already exists, you cease to ask. You simply pull. This is not just mystical poetry. Science itself hints at this truth. Psychologists have long observed the self-fulfilling prophecy. When a student assumes they are destined to fail, their behavior unconsciously aligns with failure. When they assume success, they study with confidence, act with purpose, and often succeed. Not because fate decided it, but because their assumption created coherence in their actions. Medical researchers call it the placebo effect. When patients assume a sugar pill is medicine, their bodies often respond as though healed. Consciousness organizes reality around coherent belief, and so it is with money. To ask is to say, I don't have. To assume coherently is to say, I already do. One statement keeps wealth at a distance. The other draws it into form. Consider cultural myths that have shaped our relationship with money. The story of King Midas warns us of greed, but beneath it lies another truth. What you assume becomes your reality. Midas assumed everything he touched would become gold, and so it did, even to his own despair. The Protestant work ethic, which came to dominate Western thought, assumed that labor and discipline were the only pathways to prosperity. That assumption shaped centuries of economic behavior, turning societies into engines of productivity, but also trapping generations in the belief that struggle was the only route to wealth. Now imagine assuming something entirely different, that money flows not because you earn it through endless toil, not because you plead for it from some cosmic authority, but because you are already aligned with the frequency that generates it. That assumption, when coherent at every level of your being, becomes a magnet. This is why the wealthy seem to operate from an entirely different reality. It isn't just their access to resources, it's their frequency. They embody abundance as an unquestioned fact, not as a possibility. And reality, faithful as ever, mirrors that back to them. So ask yourself, what would shift if you stopped praying for money, stopped begging, stopped reciting affirmations laced with doubt, and instead began to assume deeply, fully, coherently that abundance is your natural state? What if you walked through the world not as someone waiting to receive, but as someone who already is? That is the breaking of the loop. That is the doorway to pulling. To truly understand the pulling frequency, we must first ask, what is money at its deepest level? Strip away the coins, the bills, the banknotes, the digital balances on glowing screens. And what remains? Attention. Money is crystallized attention, consciousness shaped into form, organized into symbols of exchange. Every dollar, every coin, every transaction carries within it the imprint of human focus. Someone's creativity, someone's labor, someone's time condensed into a tangible signal of value. Think of the merchant stalls of the ancient world. In the bustling agora of Athens, a farmer offered his olives not merely as food, but as the crystallization of his season's labor. The tending of groves, the rhythm of rains, the hours under the sun. A coin exchanged was not just silver, but recognition. Your attention has created value, and I honor it with mine. In medieval guilds, a craftsman's reputation determined the flow of wealth. The cobbler who poured his full attention into each stitch naturally drew more customers than the one who cut corners. Money, then as now, flowed toward attention made coherent through skill, dedication, and service. When you begin to see money this way, the asking frequency collapses under its own illusion. To beg for money is to ask for someone else's crystallized attention without offering your own in return. To pull money is to learn how to focus your attention so precisely, so coherently, that the field responds with natural exchange. Consider this. When an artist paints with devotion, when a teacher awakens a mind, when an inventor brings an idea into form, they are giving their attention to life itself. Money flows toward them not as a cosmic reward, but as the natural echo of energy given. This is why the wealthiest figures in history were rarely those who chased coins directly, but those who mastered the art of attention. The Renaissance thrived not simply because of gold, but because attention, artistic, scientific, spiritual, was crystallized into form and recognized as priceless. So the shift becomes clear. Instead of asking, how can I get money? Ask, how can I give my attention in a way that naturally generates value? That single shift of consciousness is enough to begin moving from asking into pulling. And when you ask this question sincerely, something remarkable happens. You start to see opportunities you missed before. The project you had set aside begins to call you back. A conversation with a friend reveals an unexpected possibility. The very world around you seems to tilt, showing you pathways invisible to the grasping mind. This is not coincidence. This is alignment, because attention is the very essence of money. When you scatter it, lost in worry, drowning in doubt, you create incoherence, and money slips through your fingers. When you crystallize it, focused, intentional, aligned, you become magnetic. The field responds, value multiplies, flow begins. Throughout history, societies have instinctively known this. Indigenous potlatch ceremonies on the Pacific Northwest coast celebrated wealth, not by hoarding it, but by giving it away, demonstrating that attention and generosity create an endless cycle of return. The Stoics in Rome taught gratitude in daily exchange, reminding citizens that money was a tool, never the source of worth. Again and again, cultures have whispered the same truth. Money follows attention, and attention aligned with service generates abundance. So the practice is simple, though not easy. Instead of waking each morning asking, "What do I need today?" rise with the question, "Where can I place my attention so that value naturally emerges?" Instead of thinking, "What can I get?" ask, "What can I give?" That shift of attention from lack to value, from need to contribution, marks the first step in embodying the pulling frequency. And once that shift begins, the loop of asking weakens, dissolves, and eventually disappears. What happens when you begin to live in the pulling frequency, not just in meditation or theory, but in the practical rhythm of daily life? The transformation is subtle at first, but it is unmistakable. You stop carrying the silent tension that usually lingers around money. Instead of asking, "Will it come?" you begin to move with the quiet confidence that it already flows. This shift is not abstract. It touches the smallest, most ordinary moments. When most people check their bank accounts, they do so with anxiety, as if peering into a well to see if it has run dry. But from the pulling frequency, you check with curiosity. Each balance, each transaction becomes not evidence of scarcity, but a record of flow, a river in motion, sometimes rising, sometimes falling, but always moving. And in this shift, something extraordinary occurs. You begin to see choice where you once saw limitation. Instead of saying, "I can't afford that," you say, "That's not where I choose to direct my resources right now." The first statement assumes lack. The second assumes agency. That one difference, lack versus choice, is enough to change your entire financial vibration. History offers us countless reflections of this truth. Among the Stoics of ancient Rome, wealth was never measured by what you hoarded, but by your ability to live in alignment with virtue. Seneca, one of the wealthiest men of his time, taught that gratitude was the greatest form of wealth, for it tuned the soul to abundance, regardless of circumstance. Among the indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest, the potlatch ceremonies turned conventional ideas of wealth upside down. The most respected were those who gave the most away. Generosity was not loss, but proof of one's alignment with abundance. These cultures understood something our modern world often forgets. Money flows toward openness, circulation, and coherence, not toward grasping or hoarding. When you begin to operate from pulling frequency, your daily choices reflect this truth. Paying a bill is no longer a moment of resentment, but of gratitude. That electricity bill becomes evidence of light in your home, warmth in winter, the invisible labor of countless people who made those resources possible. Even spending money shifts from fear to flow. You no longer release it reluctantly, clutching at the thought that it may not return. You spend, invest, and give with the knowing that circulation creates more circulation. Energy that flows multiplies. Energy withheld stagnates, and the effects ripple outward. Opportunities you once overlooked begin to appear in sharp relief. Not because they weren't there before, but because you were tuned to the wrong frequency to perceive them. A phone call you were delaying suddenly feels natural to make. A casual conversation reveals an opening you would have missed had you been lost in scarcity thinking. This is the pulling frequency in action. Learn life rearranging itself to mirror your coherence. But perhaps the most profound shift is internal. You stop making decisions from fear and start making them from possibility. Instead of asking, "Can I afford to do this?" you ask, "Will doing this create value that naturally generates the financial flow I desire?" That single reframing turns every choice into an act of creation rather than survival. The pulling frequency is not about luxury or indulgence, though those may come. It is about presence, It is about realizing that every transaction, every choice, every moment of attention is an opportunity to embody abundance. And when you embody it, wealth follows, not as something chased, but as something magnetized by the frequency you broadcast. In daily life, this means the way you buy a meal, the way you exchange a smile with a stranger, the way you approach your work. All of it becomes part of the same current. The frequency you embody doesn't just shift your bank account, it reshapes your entire experience of living. There is a level of pulling frequency where money ceases to be the central concern at all. At first, this sounds impossible. How could wealth not matter? But look closely at history, and you will see a pattern. The greatest creators, inventors, and visionaries were not those who chased money, but those who poured themselves into a purpose so fully that money became an inevitable byproduct. Think of the Renaissance. Artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo did not sit in their workshops chanting for coins. They were consumed by the fire of creation, by the desire to express beauty, to reveal truth, to push human possibility further. Their patrons, wealthy families like the Medicis, recognized that value and poured rivers of gold into their work. The wealth flowed not because these artists begged for it, but because their purpose burned so brightly, it magnetized resources from all directions. Or look at the scientists of the Enlightenment. Isaac Newton did not spend his nights asking the heavens for financial security. He was obsessed with uncovering the laws of motion and gravity, and in following that obsession, he generated breakthroughs that transformed economies and empires. His purpose created value. The wealth of nations followed. This is what I call invisible wealth generation. The abundance that gathers around you when you are so deeply aligned with your gifts. That financial flow becomes secondary, almost automatic. The farmer who tends his crops with reverence, the teacher who awakens the light of understanding in a child, the healer who gives her full presence to those in pain. Each is embodying this principle. They may not all amass fortunes, but they generate a form of wealth that inevitably draws resources, opportunities, and support. Wealth, in this sense, is not about accumulation, but about overflow. It is the natural surplus that arises when you create more value than you consume. This surplus does not need to be hoarded. It can be circulated, invested, given, because you know it is not the pile of coins that matters, but the wellspring of purpose from which they flow. Modern culture often gets this backward. We are told to chase money first, then perhaps purpose will follow. But history tells the opposite story. The inventors, artists, and entrepreneurs who shifted the world, Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla, Marie Curie, Steve Jobs, were driven by something deeper than profit. Their focus on creation magnetized wealth as an after effect. Jobs once said, "I was worth over $1 million when I was 23, but it wasn't that important because I never did it for the money." His pulling frequency was alignment with vision. Money followed obediently. Living from this place changes how you approach each day. Instead of waking with the thought, "How can I make money today?" you rise with the question, "What can I create, express, or contribute that reflects my deepest purpose?" And when you act from that alignment, money ceases to feel scarce. It becomes feedback, a signal from the universe saying, "Yes, keep going. Yes, this matters. Yes, this is valuable." From this perspective, the true definition of wealth is startlingly different. Wealth is not the number in your account. Wealth is the degree to which your gifts are expressed, your purpose embodied, your presence aligned with what life itself is asking to create through you. When you live this way, financial flow becomes not the goal, but the echo. And so wealth becomes effortless. Not effortless in the sense that no work is done. Da Vinci painted for endless hours. Newton wrote thousands of pages. Curie labored in her lab until her health gave way. But effortless in the sense that the work was fueled by inspiration, not desperation. Purpose is inexhaustible fuel. Scarcity thinking burns out quickly. This is the great secret. Money is not wealth. Purpose is. And when you live aligned with purpose, money follows. Not because you asked, but because you pulled. At the deepest level, pulling money is no longer about wealth alone. It becomes about alignment with life itself. This is what I call quantum wealth consciousness, a state where abundance flows so naturally that it feels like breathing. In this state, you are not chasing money, and you are not even consciously pulling it anymore. Instead, you have become a conduit through which abundance expresses itself for the good of all. When you reach this level, money ceases to be the object of desire and becomes something far more profound, a form of communication. Every time resources flow toward you, it is not the universe saying, "You are rich now." It is the universe whispering, "Yes, keep going, keep expressing your gifts, keep serving life." Money becomes feedback, a signal that your purpose is aligned with the greater movement of creation. Consider the great philanthropists of history, not those who hoarded fortunes in fear, but those who allowed their wealth to circulate for the greater good. Andrew Carnegie, who rose from poverty in Scotland, built libraries across America not to display his riches, but because he recognized that true wealth meant expanding the creative capacity of others. In indigenous traditions, the leader was often the one who gave the most away, not the one who kept the most. Across time, true wealth has always been measured not by what one holds, but by what one allows to flow. This is the purpose abundance loop. The more clearly you align with your deepest purpose, the more abundance flows. And the more abundance flows, the freer you are to express your purpose. It is a spiral, upward and outward, carrying you beyond survival into creation, beyond accumulation into contribution. But there is a test along this path. Financial challenges, loss of income, sudden expenses, failed ventures may arrive not as punishment, but as initiations. These moments are invitations to release the beliefs and patterns that block your flow. The fear that money must come through struggle, the guilt of having more than others, the unconscious habit of self-sabotage when success draws near. When you let these old frequencies dissolve, abundance rushes in to fill the space. Many of history's greatest fortunes were born after moments of collapse, when the old structures broke and made way for new expansion. And you need not wait for hardship to evolve. You can choose what I call voluntary evolution, consciously releasing the patterns of scarcity before life forces you to. This might mean charging what your work is truly worth, rather than undervaluing yourself. It might mean choosing generosity over hoarding. It might mean following an inspired impulse, even when it defies logic. Each choice becomes a declaration. I trust the flow of life more than I trust my fear. The practice deepens when you begin to see every person you meet as an opportunity to create value, not as a strategy to get something, but as an act of resonance. Offer presence to the cashier, kindness to a stranger, wisdom to a colleague. In doing so, you embody the frequency of abundance, and others feel it. They want to collaborate with you, support you, share opportunities with you, because being in your presence feels like being closer to their own source of wealth. This is true wealth magnetism, not pulling money directly, but becoming a catalyst for value wherever you go. And here lies the most radical revelation. You're not generating abundance at all. You're revealing it. You're helping others remember the value that already lives within them. Money at this level becomes almost irrelevant. What flows instead is trust, connection, creativity, possibility. The financial resources that gather around you are only the visible shadow of a deeper reality. Life recognizing life, consciousness celebrating itself through exchange. This vision points toward a new economy, one not built on scarcity and competition, but on creativity and collaboration. Imagine a world where wealth is not hoarded in vaults, but circulated where it can create the most value. Imagine societies where success is measured not by accumulation, but by contribution. Every time you choose pulling over asking, creation over fear, value over grasping, you are seeding this world into being. And so the invitation is clear. Stop asking for money. Stop waiting for permission. Stop treating abundance as something outside of you. Instead, remember what you truly are: consciousness itself, infinitely creative, endlessly abundant, expressing through the form called you. Money is not something you must receive. It is something you already are. The field is ready. The universe is ready. The only question that remains is, are you?